Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. Today, I am your host, Matt, and I'm joined by my friends Alex and Jem. Before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem for some exclusive content, or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com.
So, today we are going to be going through something a little bit lighter, a little bit of fun. We're going to do our Mount Rushmore of video games. We are going to go through, so assume that everyone knows what Mount Rushmore is, but basically it's a mountain in America with the faces of 4 former presidents carved into it, a literal mountain. And so we thought, why not do that, but with gaming icons? Now, this is going to be a very broad, it can be a very broad definition of icon. It can be a developer, it can be a game, it can be a franchise, it can be some form of technological advancement, but that is all up to us. So, to start off with, I'll start off with a game, and that is Elden Ring. So, I would carve Elden Ring into the mountain because it has completely revolutionized my appreciation for the design of art of any kind. Because I played it for over 100 hours, got every ending the first time, and understood nothing of the world as I went through. And I didn't care because the gameplay was awesome and the world was awesome. Didn't understand anything that was happening. So in terms of having something that is so visually stunning and also gameplay that is stunning, that is one part where it raises the game. But then the transcendent part is the narrative, where it is only told through the environment and through very sparse cryptic dialogue and through like 1 or 2 sentence descriptions of all the items in the game. And I found a lore channel called Smotown who does epic length lore videos, and just every single awesome little thing in Elden Ring has a massive universe of lore behind it. And so it revolutionized my appreciation for telling a story and creating a universe. And just the more I think about it, and the more I'm still finding new lore videos, finding things that I've never heard from all the other ones I've found. And just the more and more you look, the more and more there is. And quite apart from it being staggeringly fun game to play, it is also an incredibly inspiring work of art. And it's no mistake that this is the spiritual successor to the Dark Souls games, because this is from Software, the originals who created it. So for them to create this, for anyone to create it, really, I find myself thinking often about it. I can't believe that this exists. I can't even begin to fathom how a group of people went from nothing to this experience. And I desperately would love to just go and talk to all of them exhaustively to know, how did you do this? Tell me how I can do it. And man, just every time I think about trying to write something like that, and then someone will explain, oh, did you notice this about one of the tiny elements that no one else has noticed in this character? And I haven't even made 3 things that are obvious about the character to be awesome first. And but that's what inspirational things should be. They're things to just go, oh, that's what's possible. It's like Simon Pegg in Hot Fuzz. We need to see the Nicholas Angels of the world so that we can aspire to pursue the things that excite us, and that we can break loose of the boundaries of that. So that's my first face. I'm going to go with Alex. What's your first face?
So it will come as no surprise to both of you. I had to go for Lara Croft / Tomb Raider, as it was instrumental in bringing me into the world of gaming at the tender ages of 6. And it's a pretty iconic and legendary franchise, and it's celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. Spoilers for my age. But it's, the impact of it is as a game centering a female protagonist in a time where there's basically no female protagonist. Also bringing about a new leap in technology. I played it on PC initially, but I know that with the PlayStation 1, it was a big leap into sort of a 3D world and 3D graphics, and using polygons in new and inventive ways. And it really kind of broke the mold in terms of, well, I suppose, I don't know, you call it an action-adventure game. It was really, the early ones, Tomb Raider 1 in particular, had a lot less combat than the later Tomb Raiders. It was a lot more focused on puzzles and sort of platforming in the 3D sense, like navigating your way through rooms and figuring out how to open doors and find keys, etc. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm slightly going off track. But yeah, so just because I love it so much, and it is what still makes me very excited about gaming today, Lara deserves her place on the mountain, on the Mount Gaming, I suppose we call it. I don't know. Yeah, that's my first one.
Yeah, she's 100% one of the original 3D icons, and I think about her quite often, especially as she's been more in the zeitgeist recently with the new games coming out, and then the less so the Sophie Turner.
Yes, I heard. Did you hear that she's been injured? They've had to halt production.
Yeah.
They've not said whether she got injured during production or outside of production. But, so hopefully she can recover and she's all right. They've not said how she's injured or whatever. But I read more about the cast, actually. It looks like a pretty interesting cast. Jason Isaacs is in there.
Oh, Jason.
So I love Jason Isaacs too. So yeah, there's a couple of other people whose names escape me currently, but it is a very exciting prospect, definitely. And I keep forgetting Sophie Turner, of course, played Sansa Stark in Game of Thrones. So it'll be difficult to move away from that, because that's obviously what she's most famous for, and she was, when she started out, a lot younger. So it'll be interesting to see how much she's sort of changed and sort of moved into this particular role as Lara Croft. But I'm sure she'll be fabulous, and I'll look forward to it, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I still can't imagine anyone other than Angelina Jolie as her. I was thinking, oh, she fits the role perfectly, but they still made her wear bra enhancer. That's really funny.
Ridiculous.
That there's so much like the sexualization of her is like part and parcel with her. But it has always felt that she has been bigger than that. She's been Lara Croft, and then the sexualization thing is a side thing, rather than, it's never felt like she exists only to be that. And I think that's something that the remakes, like the reboot trilogy, missed quite a lot, because it feels like they went, we don't want to sexualize her physically the way that she has been in the past. But then that sort of does a disservice to Lara as well, because you think that Lara would look the way she looks, and she would look exactly the way that she chooses to. She would present herself like that. and then she can be sexualized in a way that she wants to be, and that's okay. They're just artists haven't developed a way to recognize that yet, and Lara would be the perfect place.
I think she was definitely lacking some sassiness in the modern trilogy. Well, I understand why, because obviously they're leading up to that. But I just think, she has to be able to sort of stand up for herself and things. And of course she did do that, but in a way that I found didn't ring true to me for her character in that modern trilogy. But yeah, each to their own, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. We'll see. Well, the future is certainly varied for Lara Croft, so we'll see. We'll see what they come up with. Jem, what is your first face?
Okay, I'm going to take us all the way back to 1998, and I'm going to put Thief, the Dark Project forward. It was a Looking Glass Studios IDIS interactive game. And I've talked about it before because I just loved it. It was probably one of the first proper sort of PC games that I played. I mean, I'd obviously played PC games before that, but most of them were text-based or quite like little ASCII things and maybe Doom. But Thief really brought in a whole new concept around gaming, around this idea of sneaking about and not just running about and hitting things. It was actually about like lurking in the shadows and shooting somebody with a bow or stabbing someone in the back. And it was the precursor to one of your favorite games, Hitman, Matt. And I think without Thief, we wouldn't have a lot of the games that we've loved and talked a lot about on the podcast. And it was certainly the first PC stealth game to actually use light and sound as part of the mechanics of the game. And I was sort of looking into like interesting facts about the game because this topic is so open that I was like, how am I going to choose? I mean, how do you choose 4 games for this sort of thing? But anyway, so some of the interesting facts that came up for it were which I didn't know, was that originally it had been intended to be a normal sort of hack and slash. So the idea was that you ran around the city beating things up with your sword. But when they were doing gameplay testing, they found that people generally avoided the NPCs because there were so many of them that it was quite difficult to kill them all. And they were like, maybe we can do something with this in our game design. So they actually pivoted and made the game more about sneaking about and hiding in the shadows. And I have sort of, aside from the fact that I really enjoyed playing it, one of the things about the game is that they had these sort of, well, they called them like AI, but they're not like today's AI, but AI guards who had these routines that they would go through. So they would stand somewhere, have a little conversation, and then they would walk somewhere else and have another little conversation, walk back round. So they had like routes and routines, and if you were engaged and sensible and clever, you would like clock that at that point they separate and you can go in and take one out without the other one attacking you. But the other thing they did was they also talked to each other, and they would say stuff that would give you hints about things you could do in the game or places you could go or where there might be like weapons or where people might be. So if you just sat and listened round a corner or behind a box or something like that, you could learn so much about the game that you could just as easily wander through and not ever hear those things and just find your way through anyway. So I think it was just really revolutionary in its approach. And obviously, 1998 is sort of early internet days, so it's very, very early on and very sort of historical. So I think it was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. And I know that there was a second one brought out, and then there was all these rumors that they were going to bring out a third. And I think there's been all sorts of problems with the IP and who owns it, and people not wanting to do anything with it now. And to be fair, I don't know if they could recreate it because it was of its time. But the other reason why it's always sort of holds a special place for me is because it was a game that my boyfriend at the time was playing, and his computer was in our bedroom. So, and this was in the days before anyone used headsets and things, like just nobody even thought about doing that. And so he used to be playing. He was always up really late, so he'd be playing this game and sneaking about, and they'd be like, and then like hearing people dying and stuff. And I used to have the weirdest dreams when I like gone to bed and he was still playing this game, because I had all these weird sounds coming into my head. And in the end, I was like, you have to turn the sound down. I can't cope. I'm having such weird dreams. So yeah, it's just a very good game, and definitely deserves to be up there on Mount Rushmore.
There's foundation games that the further and further we get away from those, the harder it is to imagine a world without that kind of mechanic. So like playing Hitman and then playing the Dishonored games recently, and just going back and going, it feels like an unsophisticated version of something from this game, but it feels unsophisticated because it was one of the first ones to do it. And it is disappointing. So like with Star Trek at the moment, Star Trek is in the news a lot at the minute because the new Starfleet Academy show has been cancelled. And there are people, Captain Kirk, William Shatner himself has been saying that Star Trek has always been woke, and that to criticize it now, this show based on that, is nonsense. And that's true if you're coming at it from a point of you don't like social justice and diversity and all those right-wing things. That's one thing. You should want it to be cancelled because it's an obscene piece of shit. It utterly shits on everything that Star Trek is and has ever been. It's an absolute, just there aren't the words to describe how appalling it is as a Star Trek thing. But then I have the original, and then its legacy is not just Star Trek thing. It's all the other things that it paved the way for. So we don't necessarily need Thief 2 because we've got Hitman and Dishonored and everything else. Right, my second face is going to be, I'll go with another game. So this was a tough one. It was either going to be whether it should be a game or a character, or a franchise, or of which franchise should it be? I don't know. I think I'm going to have to go with Kratos from God of War, because he was my like coming of age game, whereas my first ever one was Hercules, playing on the PlayStation 1 in my nappy. And then God of War came out 2005 and just gave me this just power fantasy ultra violent outlet, which I clearly needed and still need to be able to just violently deal with all the problems that are coming, that you're faced with. And then that's an example of it. It got better and better and better and better and better, and then stopped, and then came back completely different, but still exactly the same and better and better and better. So it was made by a studio that was pushing the absolute boundaries of what's possible on the PlayStation 2, and then pushed the boundaries again on PlayStation 2 with the second game. Then was the push PlayStation 3 to the technical limits again in the third one. And then PS4, the God of War Ragnarok plays on a PS4 somehow. And so both again, like with Elden Ring, it's the artistic creativity is one thing, and then there's the technical brilliance, which is a completely different thing. And then it's the one that is it's gone from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 5, and it's going to carry on into the future because it's just going from strength to strength. And just it has to be on Mount Rushmore. The other my other, I've talked myself into it because the other one was Assassin's Creed, the franchise, because that's been around for me for a long time as well. But that started in 2007 when when the PlayStation 3 came out.
Yeah.
And that God of War was 2005 in the middle of the PS2. So yeah, Kratos is great big. Don't know how hard it must be to sculpt beard into rock, but you'll find a way. Alex, what is your second face?
So I took your word where you said we could make it as broad as we liked and ran with it. And I am going to be representing all sort of tabletop, sort of parlour-y party type games with my next entry. And this is Bagatelle. Do you know what Bagatelle is? No idea. Okay, so it was popular since the 19th century. It's a direct ancestor to modern pinball. So basically, it's basically a board, like a wooden board with loads of nails in it, and they're in all different shapes, like arches, so this. And you have a little round silver ball, and you put it in the chute, and you fire it off with a lever, and it goes right round the top, and you have to kind of get it to go into the little nail baskets. And each of the baskets has a different number attached to it. So essentially, you set yourself and your party a score, say like 525, and you each have to try and get to that number without going over that number and going bust. We have a Bagatelle board that we bring out every Christmas home, so it's a really important game for our family and a very big Christmas tradition. We have tournaments, and on the back of our Bagatelle board is a little adhesive label where my uncle has written the board record for the person that scored the highest amount with 10 of the balls, and then like a sort of best number to go for in terms of the tournament setting. Somewhere between 400 and 600 is usually a good idea. But we take it very seriously. It gets very, very loud. We're very glad that we happen to live in a detached house at Christmas when I go to my parents', because we will literally scream the house down, watching the balls go around and then different people getting buffs or having like one shot left. That's thank you, Matt. That's brilliant. That's just sharing some images of Bagatelle. Ours is more of a brown board, like that one there. Yeah, the large Bagatelle tabletop. That's more or less exactly what it looks like, and it's incredibly fun and very, very competitive. And it's a very old game, but I think it serves as a really decent representative of the types of games that you might play in the pub, for example, like those sorts of games, or you can easily have them at home and play with friends and family. But I think also it's just nice to remind ourselves of like the more analog types of gaming. Of course, we do discuss tabletop gaming and board gaming here on the pod, but I thought, no, I'm going to put Bagatelle up there because it's a classic for us. So yeah, that's my second choice.
Seen those in pubs. I've never ever played it.
It's so fun. Definitely give it a go.
I've never
Yeah.
been how it works, so that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
No, it is good. We do have to sort of prop it up a certain angle sometimes just to get the flow of the little balls right. We do a couple of test shots to see sort of how they're falling through the pins. Because the skill is you can get it to bounce off of different pins to go into different sort of baskets, just like in pinball. But there is a knack to it, definitely. And it's very fun trying to work out the different tactics and see how, if sometimes you might need only 5 points and then you do a very gentle shot, it just misses and floats all the way down to the 125 basket and then you're buffed. So yeah, there's all sorts of interesting scenarios. But yes, I think I won in, 2 goes last. And my second go, I got it right straight away. And one of the best I've ever done. I had a very lucky run where I had like several high scoring balls and then just so happened to get it with the last shot that I had. That was very exciting. And then on about another hour or so until everyone else managed to finish because they kept busting. So yeah, it can go on for quite a while, definitely.
And those like feels like they're from the 1800s. That kind of game, especially when you look at those particular. Just Google Bagatelle if you want to see what it looks like, and you'll go, "Oh, one of those." And two, that looks dangerous. It looks like a bed of nails that you could fall over and stab yourself on. And then that it feels like pub games, like turn of the last century pub games. Yeah, that's cool. Jem, what is your second face?
Yeah, I'm really struggling actually to decide what my second place is. I think it's going to have to be The Sims. Because again, we've talked a lot about The Sims in the past, but it came out in 2000, which is weird because in my head it came out in about 1985, but it came out in 2000, the first one, and the latest content for it came out this year. So, it's still running 26 years later, which I think is pretty impressive. And apparently it was sort of conceived of when the guy whose name I have forgotten, when the designer Will Wright lost his house in a fire, and so he came up with this idea of creating a game where when you build a home, and it's kind of, I'm guessing it's like the OG sandbox game, really, because it didn't have any goals. The goal was simply to play and to create and to follow your little Sims around. And I think the fact that when you get to the top of your career ladder in the game, you basically stop and start again. So, I think that's quite interesting. And I'm still talking to people today who are just starting to play it or just getting into it, or people who have played it their whole lives, or people that have been away from it and gone back to it. And I have many versions of it on my PC and my PlayStation, and it's just one of those games that I think is really unique and interesting, and has not had a decent competitor in all of those 26 years. Nothing has really come along that has toppled The Sims from its slightly niche position. But it's very simple. It's very basic, but it just does it really, really well. And one of the things that I was reading is that apparently they when they originally started working on it, they weren't given much budget or much sort of, there wasn't a lot of hope for it because it was such a different game from what was coming out at the time. And they were doing a demonstration of a wedding, and suddenly a couple of the NPCs in the background just spontaneously kissed, because that was just, part where they got to in their little conversation or whatever. And that's one of the things that's lovely about The Sims, is that you can micromanage your various characters, but you can also just let them go off and do their own things, and they will quite often die, but they'll also go off and do all sorts of stuff, fall in love, fall out of love, fall in the swimming pool, turn into a werewolf. There's all sorts of things that could happen. And apparently when these two characters kissed in the background, everyone went wild, and they were like, we're onto something here. And I think that is really the heart of it, that even though it's quite a simplistic game, it allows you to rebuild your life, which I guess was the basic kind of concept behind it, given that it came out of this house fire. And, you can build your life in the game. You can replicate it. I replicated my first home, my first house that I bought, and used to play in there, and just, it was just lovely. And I know other people who've actually used it to try and work out what they should put where in their rooms and things like that. So people are just using it for all sorts of stuff, and there's some amazing videos and stuff online of things that people have built with it, and stories that people have done. I watched a little mini series where these people were just creating this whole sort of drama within The Sims, and they were just doing a little soap opera with The Sims as their medium. And so it's just a really interesting game and fun community as well. So I think it's definitely deserves a space on that mountainside. And I think the symbol, rather than a face, would have to be the sort of little, I don't know what you call it, like a little diamond thing that goes over people's heads to tell you how happy they are. I sometimes think it would be good if we had that in real life, actually.
Definitely, yeah. Can get on board with that.
Yeah, that... Again, going the further you go back to these foundation games, the harder it is to go, well, I wouldn't find it very interesting. That side of game doesn't really speak to me. But when nothing like that existed and there wasn't another option, I can't imagine, because we've crossed so many technological boundaries and creative boundaries that it feels like the room for great big innovation is much smaller than it was in the past, which is disappointing. But yeah, the Sims is clearly one of those ones that people have had entire massive universes of their lives that they've been able to spend in these things, and it must certainly have been the predecessor to Minecraft and any other kind of life simulator thing. So yeah, I think all of those are excellently placed on our own separate Mount Rushmores. I think they can face each other and admire each other. Right. So thank you both for those. We are going to bring this session to a close, and then we will come back again with the other two faces on each of our Mount Rushmores. So until then, we will see you next time. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.